Welcome to episode 14 of Scorned by Muses. What does it mean to be a master of fine art? We got an email from these MFA students at Hunter. It says, "Dear Yearbook Committee team, I hope this email finds you well. Your recent commentary about a broad variety of topics ranging from a series of missives deriding MFA art to your most recent statements about beauty and the state of contemporary art from your last video have piqued the interest of myself and my fellow Hunter MFA peers. Because of your repeated targeted comments against the MFA experience, and in the interest of opening a dialogue to bridge a perceptual gap we see growing, I would like to extend an invitation to you to come to our thesis exhibition, Rosetta, up until 4/22 in whatever capacity you see fit. I understand that typically critics try to refrain from engaging with MFA programs, but in light of your repeated comments, specifically about MFA programs/educations, I think it may be fruitful to begin a dialogue with some soon-to-be post-MFA students. If this sounds interesting to you, come by and see what some current MFAs are making and thinking about, and let's compare notes. Sincerely, Martin Miller." We accepted Martin's invitation, and we took a car across town to visit him and his Hunter classmates. How are you?
Drop off Taylor on the left.
Hi, Stephanie. Nice to meet you.
Take one, A mark. Take one, B mark. Take one, C mark. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I don't know. Do you want to talk about art?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels weird, like talking about the art, and it's like, I don't know, because then it's just going to become like a crit or something, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone's here. I mean, we could do that if you want to do that, but I don't know how. Like, what's your?
I'm open to that. I just don't necessarily know if I'm okay with like airing it.
Oh, okay.
Like immediately. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just like, we spend 3 years getting critted here, and I think this is like the one moment where you don't get a crit, and it's actually like extremely relieving.
Yeah.
I was having a hard time figuring out why these people had asked me to be here. It seemed like they didn't want to talk about the art. They were afraid I was going to say mean things to them. Their egos couldn't handle it. So I tried a different tack.
I guess I can like maybe restate some of the things that maybe prompted you to reach out to me, and that might be something that can help us talk a little bit.
I will say I was like largely thinking about the last video in particular.
The last video in particular, yeah. What about the last video in particular? When I said that there's so many masters of fine art and so few masterpieces, there's a kind of irony that we have so many masters of fine art out there and so few masterpieces.
A bit of that, I question the idea of the masterpiece
Uh-huh.
right now a little bit, or like, I mean, right, because there's a lot of that is like representation of beauty through relationship to divinity.
Yeah.
We're in a completely different time right now.
You know, what does it mean to be a master of fine art? Right?
Yeah.
That like you make a masterpiece so that you can be accepted into the guild of master craftspeople.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I guess the current state of contemporary art is not one in which like craft. I mean, there are certain areas in which people are interested in craft, but it's not about like craft. It's actually in this very strange period where, like you were just saying this, like in here we have painting, we have conceptual art, we have photography, we have all these different disciplines.
which are, being presented together. And I think one would imagine that you are asking them to be considered within the same conversation. So what is that conversation, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of like rest back at simply in like a diversity of voices. We know so much, we see so much. Perspective is always fantastic, right? What can we offer each other in terms of like what we're thinking of, where we're coming from, our personal histories, what we're reading? It kind of comes together in spaces like these.
So the substance of the conversation doesn't matter? It's just about having as many people speaking as possible.
Or we don't make in similar ways. We don't think in similar ways, but
I don't want your friend to run away here. So, now, curious to hear some of your thoughts as well.
I mean, people say that my work is like crafty, super crafty. Like here, especially. This is my work right here.
This is your work.
Yeah, and it's like I'm doing like frottage on paper and then gluing them to canvas, and there's like layers of rubbing and printmaking techniques, and then painting, and it's like, so I guess I'm just trying to understand what your like definition of craft maybe is like in 2025. I guess like do you mean like chiseling away at like marble craft? Like I guess I'm just like trying to understand.
I mean, the analogy that I was trying to make is like guild crafts, right? Like you're a hat maker, or you're a furniture maker, or you're a stonemason. Like these are all crafts, and like you have to go through a long apprenticeship before you can be a master craftsman. And like you would make a masterpiece to present to the guild, and they would look at it and say, okay, you can be accepted into this guild because you have achieved the necessary like artisanal skill to be able to execute at the level of a master. And obviously like the MFA system as it exists today is not like a guild craft system. I mean, maybe there are these sort of like atelier schools where it's like, okay, you actually do make a masterpiece. And so I guess the question is if that's not the criteria to be considered a master. And we are being considered, like you are now about to become masters of fine art, right? Yeah. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a master of fine art?
Anthony, who stood there silently dissociating, could do nothing but laugh nervously in response to my question. The obvious source of his laughter is that he knows it's ridiculous to call himself a master. Then, suddenly, a young woman emerged from the shadows to speak the first intelligent words I had heard all morning.
I think it's a complicated problem that you're raising, right? Because when you're making the craft art, fine arts distinction, that's like a historical distinction that arose, right? 1500s, 1600s. If you take like Vasari's Lives of the Artists as the first kind of setting, painting, apart from other types of arts, right? And then you have like Reynolds writing in England in the 1600s with the founding of the Royal Academy. And so you have this real intense effort in Europe to differentiate fine arts as a liberal art, right, from the crafts, right? And so Reynolds is putting painting in with the liberal arts. And so we're inheritors of a history of fine arts as something distinct from craft, right? Yeah. And you can kind of see that logical end roll out through whatever modernism is, and then like Duchamp, and suddenly anything can be art, right? And then that kind of gets us where we are now, where the question of like what you learn in a master's program is not a craft necessarily. And
so what are you learning?
In my eyes, a master's of fine art is a pragmatic move to teach or to like find a job. And then there's like a kind of utopic hope that you find people to talk to and cultivate community and like conversations, right? And that's a hope that is held against the fact that it's a institution that you're paying money for.
Yeah, so then I guess what would towards what end, and maybe the conversations in the community is an end in itself, but towards what end do you hope to cultivate a conversation in the community?
Personally, I think that's kind of what you want, right? You want like 4 people you can talk to, right? Like,
That sounds pretty bleak.
I mean,
That you have to spend $50,000 a year to find 4 people that you can be friends with?
I don't think.
Or $50,000,
I mean,
not $50,000 a year, $50,000 for 3 years.
It's like 30,000 for 3 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think that you can look at it that way. I think you can be spending $800 a month on a studio, also looking for a community, and that's another way, right? And the point is to just like figure out how to spend as little money as possible, I think, and find the people who want to have conversations that are exciting. The fact that art, right, once art has separated itself from craft and is a fine arts tradition, suddenly medium specificity doesn't matter anymore. So what is unifying art, right? And so I think one answer to that people have been trying is an is like, let's read all the same texts and we'll be a part of the same conversation. But the problem with that is, if you are our age and you go to school as an 18-year-old and suddenly you're being taught all these texts that are simply critical, right? Or critical about something you haven't already felt or internalized, right? Then you have a problem, and I think that is actually what causes a lot of the reaction against people like Foucault or like post-structuralism or art in general, is that people have felt like they're out of a conversation inside of universities, right? And they're being taught things that aren't relevant and they don't care about, and now want to reject it all.
Yeah, I feel like what millennials and younger have inherited from the tradition of art and from the tradition of thought is a rejection of modernism and a rejection of like the Enlightenment and of modernity and all of these kinds of things without understanding it as such. They just think that this is how you're supposed to think, that the like historical specificity of that rejection, which like Foucault and all these people, they were just rejecting Marxism.
Like I see what you're saying, and I see the problem that you're mapping out. I think there are problems with a kind of general reaction to institutions or to a certain school of thought, though, right? Like Deleuze, one of my favorite writers ever. His book on Bacon is like a masterpiece, and I think part of the talking past each other that happens is that we were taught certain texts that didn't resonate with us because we hadn't internalized a tradition. There's a reaction against that, but it's also a general reaction, right? And so to be able to appreciate certain thinkers for the specificity of their thought rather than grouping them into like movements, I think is ultimately like what will save us as like thinkers, right? To be able to deal with the text, and I think that maps.
As Anna and I talked, I sensed the crew getting a bit weary, so I thought it might be time for a coffee break. You doing okay, Jesse? Okay. Just wanted to make sure that you're okay holding the, because we could take a break if you guys are feeling. As we were leaving to grab coffee, we found Anthony and Justin, 2 of the other MFA students, hunched over a chessboard. Justin, the winner, challenged me to a match. I'm feeling nervous. I don't know why, but yeah. It's all right, man. We're all right. You know. Yeah. It's just a game. Just a game. You like the speed? Congratulations to the winner. I would say that the artwork, as we think of it, is inseparable from the commodity. You know, that it only ever existed because it was a commodity. That the Renaissance sort of allowed things which would have otherwise been in the temple, in the cathedral, that were part of like a religious cosmology, to be taken out of that context and then put in the homes of bourgeois merchants. So I think there's definitely a desire to go beyond that, but I would say that we can't really go beyond that without changing the kind of fundamental way in which we relate to art or which society is organized.
Yeah, it feels like we're like shaking our fists in the air, trying to be noticed in a way. But like, yeah, that like it's just like a very like core biological impetus just to be like looking and making and responding. But we have to present something final, and we have to present it to the public in a way that's, I don't know, saleable, or it's because like in the studio, and like everything is a bit formless. Everything is constantly shifting, and maybe something you thought was finished becomes unfinished when you make something else. So it's this like open diary that you're constantly writing in and editing. But the demands of the art market, yeah, they want a thing. And like, I don't know, I keep on bringing that up because we're so close to it here, and we've seen friends get like represented right out of school.
You're waiting for opportunity to walk in the door. Literally, you guys are sitting here waiting for opportunity to walk in the door. It's kind of, I mean, that's not even a metaphor. That's just like you're waiting for someone to come in and say, I love it.
Yeah,
and then
which is like,
I'm gonna put this in the gallery, and you're gonna become rich.
No, I mean, I'm just gonna apply for jobs and, you know, try to make it work. I was joking with somebody that like, yeah, it's like, well, actually, I wasn't even joking. I was just like talking to somebody about how this opportunity, thesis, this gallery, this opportunity, it's like time to show a big painting. It might never be time again for me to show a big painting. Like, this is the time to show a big painting, so why not just like do it? That's probably one of the biggest takeaways from this whole program, probably, is just this, getting the space. Yeah. Not even the classes and the teachers. It's like the cohort and the space is like the biggest number one for me.
It's like what
I
you're
can't
paying
speak
for.
on everybody. Yes,
Yeah.
I would say that I've noticed since there's new faculty here that the art on a whole has sort of shifted, and that's only in the in the 3-year period that we've been here. I've sort of noticed that.
What's been the change?
I don't know. I think it's a change that isn't exclusive to Hunter. I think it's a change in the art world in New York and just art in general.
It's not like I can't like perceive some like like millennial versus like Gen Z like art difference that's happening here at Hunter, because I don't know what it, I don't know who those students are, or do we have people born in like 2002 here? I don't know. It'd be crazy.
Yeah.
I guess
Probably,
I'm
right?
the last millennial.
3, 4.
95.
Oh shit, you're
Young. Yeah.
got the last chopper out of Nam.
Yeah.
What an image. You see it hanging off that rail.
Or like I went to school in LA, so like in LA we had like the lineages of like conceptual art, and my teacher was Larry Pittman, and he worked at a time when painting was like proposed to be dead. And he's always like witty and funny and saying like he loves a fixer-upper, so
He loves a fixer-upper.
yeah.
What does that mean?
Like like real estate, like flipping. You know? And
but
like,
what does that mean in the
and
context?
so in painting, like something to respond to, and like I don't know, like we've been talking so much about like all the like headwinds, in like the market or like coming out of grad school, and I'm like, maybe the headwinds are like it could be like a positive thing, like some tension to like work against in a way. So then I was like 2014 like learning about contemporary art, and like zombie formalism was like the conversation of abstract painting, so it's like that then produces like how do you think about process-based abstraction and like a way that's not this. I think we could have a different relationship with history than like our teachers could, who have like had to, you know?
Yeah, so how would you describe then the kind of difference between the, I guess, millennial reception of that history versus the millennials' teachers' reception of that history?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're like further away from it, you know? Like kind of that's kind of what I said before. I can't think of anything else though.
But do you think that distance is a productive distance, or do you think that it potentially is a problem?
Or you know, like in this way how like Japanese brands looked at like American vintage clothing and then like make their rendition of it, and now like American companies are making like their rendition of Japanese Americana. Yeah. So it's like we're constantly like filtering through this sort of like relationship with a historical thing or something. Yeah. So it wouldn't be good to make de Kooning paintings again, or you know, Ad Reinhardt paintings again, or something like repeating this cycle, you know. But yeah, it's also not like how do you do something new?
Yeah.
So
you're saying that shouldn't be the question, or
yeah, I guess it just isn't. I don't know. I guess I just don't think about it as much, you know.
What do you think about?
I think I'm thinking about like my own like excitement and like joy in making paintings. Like if I can be like carefree and excited, and I'm like laughing in my studio to myself when I'm doing some funny shit in there, and then I hear from people and they're like, you know, I see that, you know. I feel like I was making abstract painting halfway through this program, and in like a big critique, everyone was like, you know, modernism, you know, why modernism? Like, why does this bring up like 1950s New York color palette and texture and all of this, you know? And I've heard of that conversation to other painters here too, and they kind of try to defend it, you know? It's like, that's the best time of painting and stuff like that, you know? It's like, I don't really want to defend it. In fact, I don't want to talk about it, for me personally. So then I finally got to this place where people stopped bringing it up, and I was like so excited, because it's just a different conversation, you know what I mean?
What is the conversation? If it's not about that, then what is the painting conversation that's happening?
I don't know, any kind of conversation. People have been talking about, shit, I don't even know what they've been talking about with these paintings.
Justin seemed to not want to have to think about his paintings. He wants to ignore the historical context. He just wants to achieve a kind of Dionysian ecstasy in the studio, erupting into fits of laughter as his brush caresses the canvas. As we were sitting and talking to Justin, Anna, the woman who had emerged from the shadows earlier, slipped us a note inviting us to come visit her in her studio upstairs. Justin and Martin escorted us. Anna was the Apollonian counterpart to Justin's Dionysianism. Rather than indulgent ecstasy, she seemed to be interested in ordering the world into discrete sites of meaning. Painting as a way of meaning-making is something I'm interested in. But Anna and I had some disagreements about what meaning-making means.
I think there's a despair about being able to make meaning or feel meaning or have things be meaningful. And which is the despair often of like, there's nothing new to do, right? It feels like everything has been done, and if there's something new, then it's like a fad that gets co-opted by the market like immediately and then ceases to be new, right? And so the problem of making meaningful particulars, I think meaning only exists in a particular thing, right? And so a painting, for example, or a performance piece, or like an installation, right? Whatever the unit of art is where meaning arises. But it requires a suppression of the viewer's ego, I think. Like,
you keyed in on a few things that I think were interesting. One is like, you said that meaning, well, I want you to expand on what you mean, but I think you said that meaning only exists in the particular, or it can only be instantiated in the particular. But I feel like for meaning to mean anything, that it has to be kind of like a universal, right? That it might take form in a particular, but that in order for that particular instance of reality, or whatever, that you're congealing meaning into, that has to mean something beyond itself, or it has to mean something, or it has to mean something to people, right? It can't just be kind of.
My sense is that right, because when we use the word meaning, there are a few ways we can think about it. Like significance or importance, right? And there's this idea of like subjective meaning that's like inside me and private to me, right? And then there's a type of meaning of like a proposition where you're like, this is the logical meaning of this proposition or whatever, like you parse it, right? And I think art's realm of meaning is in between those two things. On the one hand, a painting is like ultimately ideally accessible. I don't think that painting should be viewed through our history or historical lens or a conceptual lens, right? I think you arrive at the painting and start seeing what's there, and then start seeing how it's built together, and then there's a kind of then you can bring in things that it asks you to bring in, right?
Anna, though more sophisticated in her rationalizations than Justin, was plotting a similar escape from history. Anna's answer is to erect a kind of nominalism. Against our reliance on narratives or abstract universals, she hopes to ground us in transhistorical particulars that can serve as guides to meaning. The meaning making that I'm interested in with painting is that almost every other human activity, like you can say that the meaning is like purely pragmatic. That what it means is what it does, right? That like the meaning of a shoe is to contain and protect my foot. The meaning of my bag is to hold my belongings so they don't scatter across the floor. The meaning of a painting is only that which we kind of put there freely. That doesn't have a sort of like deterministic, it's not determined by its function because it doesn't actually have a function, right? It's this thing which doesn't really have a reason to be there, at least after the break with like traditional society, right? After it's no longer the fresco on the cathedral wall. And the whole like project of modernism, insofar as I understand it, is like trying to make meaning in a way that is specific as possible to the discipline of painting. So that it shouldn't be reliant on anything outside of the painting itself for its meaning. And that's the only way in which it is truly meaning-making, truly free, because otherwise its meaning is that it's an image or a reference to something other than itself.
Yes. No, I know that narrative of modernism.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I think it's what got me into painting. I don't think the things we recognize or that are represented in painting are external to it necessarily, right? You look at a Corot or something, and the way into looking at a Corot is to be like, that's a weird tree, Like, that's the weirdest tree I've ever seen in my life. And you're like, why the hell would he have painted a tree? Or like a Hopper building, right? Yes, but that's where you start.
For Greenberg, for example, which I'm sort of a Greenbergian to a certain degree, for him it's actually less about like representation and abstraction, it's about like flatness. That the flatness of the painting is the thing which is painting's own. Yeah. That a painting of a tree is actually also an abstraction, right? It's a representation of a tree, but it's abstracting what a tree actually is onto a flat plane that you create the illusion of three-dimensionality on.
He thinks painting has been forced into that position, right?
Yeah.
That it's, in a sense, a like not necessarily the best thing. Not that painting ought to strive for it, but
No,
that
not that it's ought, but
yeah.
but that it's been forced into that because of the crisis of society and painting responding to that crisis, or art responding to that crisis.
Yeah. No, and I think flatness is, I mean, obviously, like we're working on flat surfaces, and like when you're in a room by yourself painting, you're like, okay, I'm smearing colorful paste on.
The earth is flat.
Yeah. And like I'll go out for drinks afterwards, and I'll just be like looking at people's faces and being like, oh, I could represent, like this would be the brush stroke I would
flattens
use.
the world for you.
Yeah.
You're the painter's gaze.
Yeah. But I still, yeah, I think I am anti-narrative to rationalize a painting practice.
So it seems for these contemporary painters, the grand narratives truly have ended. History itself has ended. And what of the Art Academy? It's a closed loop, a factory which produces the teachers who will teach the next generation of teachers. The academy then becomes an end in itself, a safe harbor for the artists who might want to ignore the stormy sea of history, a place for those not brave enough to batten down the hatches and take the helm. But history continues, and with any luck, it will leave the artists behind and fashion the world anew.